Welcome to ChronosX Secrets. Think about the device you are watching this on right now. A phone, a tablet, a computer. Every single thing it does, every app, every calculation, every piece of software exists because someone had an idea. And that idea did not come from Silicon Valley. It did not come from a tech billionaire. It did not come from a man in a laboratory in the 20th century. It came from a young woman in the year 1843, writing with a pen and ink in a world that did not even have electricity in homes yet. Her name was Ada Lovelace, and she imagined the computer nearly 100 years before it was actually built. But her story is not just about mathematics. It is about a woman who was told her entire life that she was too fragile, too emotional, too female to do serious scientific work. And she proved every single one of them wrong. In the next 15 minutes, we will look at where Ada came from and the difficult childhood that shaped her. We will see how she met the man who changed her life and the incredible machine that inspired her greatest work. We will read what she actually wrote and understand why the whole world of computing owes her a debt. And we will learn about her tragic early death and why the world forgot her for over 100 years. This is Ada Lovelace, the woman who saw the future before the future even existed. Chapter 1. A Dangerous Inheritance. Ada Lovelace was born on December 10, 1815, in London, England. Her father was one of the most famous men in Britain at the time. His name was Lord Byron. He was a poet, a celebrity, a scandal. People called him mad, bad, and dangerous to know. And they were not entirely wrong. Byron was brilliant, but he was also reckless and wildly unpredictable. He had affairs. He spent money he did not have. He fought with everyone around him. Ada's mother, Annabella Milbank, was the opposite. She was calm, disciplined, and deeply interested in mathematics. People actually called her the Princess of Parallelograms because of her love of geometry. The marriage between Byron and Annabella lasted barely a year. When Ada was just 5 weeks old, her mother packed her things and left. She took baby Ada with her, and Lord Byron left England forever shortly after. Ada never saw her father again. He died in Greece when she was 8 years old. Now you might think this would make Ada romantic about her father, that she would idealize him, dream about him. But Ada's mother had other plans. Annabella was terrified. She believed that Byron's wild and emotional nature was something that could be inherited. She was convinced that if Ada was allowed to be creative and imaginative, she would end up like her father, unstable, destructive, ruined. So Annabella made a decision. She would raise Ada on mathematics and logic, hard facts, cold numbers, structured thinking, no poetry, no emotion, no imagination. Here is the irony of that decision. Annabella thought she was protecting Ada from her father's influence, but what she actually did was give Ada the tools she would one day use to change the world. Ada turned out to be extraordinarily gifted at mathematics, not just good, genuinely exceptional. Numbers made sense to her in a way they did not for most people. And even though her mother tried to suppress her imagination, Ada could not stop herself from dreaming. When she was 12 years old, she decided she wanted to fly. Not in a balloon, not in a dream. She actually wanted to build a flying machine. She spent weeks studying birds, measuring their wings, calculating the ratio of wingspan to body weight. She wrote it all down in a little book she called Flyology. She was 12, and she was already combining mathematics with imagination in a way that most adults never manage. She was her mother's daughter in discipline and her father's daughter in vision, a combination that would make her unlike anyone who had ever lived. Chapter 2. The Machine and the Meeting. When Ada was 17 years old, she was taken to a demonstration. It was the kind of event that educated young people in London attended, a gathering at the home of a scientist and mathematician named Charles Babbage. Charles Babbage was one of the most interesting and frustrating men in the history of science. He was brilliant, everyone agreed on that. He was also difficult, obsessive, and almost impossible to work with. He had spent years trying to build something he called the difference engine, a mechanical machine that could perform mathematical calculations automatically. The British government had given him a large amount of money to build it. He never actually finished it. He kept redesigning it, improving it, starting over. The government eventually gave up on him, but Babbage did not give up on himself. By the time Ada met him, he had moved on to an even more ambitious idea. He called it the analytical engine, and when Ada saw his plans for this machine, something happened inside her. Most of the people who attended Babbage's demonstrations were politely impressed. They nodded, they said, "How interesting," and they went home and thought about something else. Ada did not do that. She went home and could not stop thinking. She wrote to Babbage. She asked questions, deep, technical, penetrating questions that Babbage himself said surprised him. He later described Ada as the only person who had ever truly understood what the analytical engine could do. The two began a correspondence that would last for years. Babbage became her mentor, her collaborator, her intellectual companion, and Ada threw herself into mathematics with a new intensity. She studied for hours every day. She was also dealing with serious health problems throughout this period. As a child, she had suffered from measles that affected her vision. She had episodes of illness that left her bedridden for months. She struggled with what we might today recognize as anxiety and depression, but she kept working because she had seen something in Babbage's machine that she could not unsee. She had seen the future, and she was determined to describe it. Chapter 3. The Notes That Changed Everything. In 1842, an Italian mathematician named Luigi Menabrea attended one of Babbage's lectures about the analytical engine. He was so impressed that he wrote a paper about it in French. Babbage asked Ada to translate the paper into English. She was 26 years old. She was fluent in French and deeply understood the machine. She seemed like the perfect person for the job. And she did translate it. But then, she did something more. Babbage noticed that she had added her own notes to the translation. He asked her how extensive these notes were. Ada told him they were quite long. He suggested she simply publish them alongside the translation. What Ada had written was not a footnote. It was not a brief comment. It was almost 3 times longer than the original paper. It was a completely original work of scientific thinking. She signed it simply, A.A.L., Ada Augusta Lovelace. 3 letters, because she knew that if she used her full name, people would not take the work seriously. She was a woman, in 1843, writing about mathematics and machines. The letters were protection. So what did these notes actually say? First, Ada explained the analytical engine more clearly than anyone had ever explained it before. She described how it worked, what it could do, how it was different from every other calculating machine that had come before it. Second, she described something that Babbage himself had not fully understood. She wrote that the machine was not just a calculator. It could do anything that could be expressed in numbers. It could compose music. It could create graphics. It could solve any problem, not just mathematical ones, as long as you could give it the right instructions. This is the idea that underlies every computer ever built, every phone, every laptop, every server in every data center in the world. The idea that a machine can be general purpose, that it can do anything if you tell it what to do. That idea came from Ada Lovelace in 1843. Third, and this is the part that earned her the title of first programmer, she wrote out a detailed set of instructions for the machine. Step by step, precise, logical, instructions for calculating a specific sequence of numbers called Bernoulli numbers. This was an algorithm, the first algorithm ever written for a machine, the world's first computer program, written by hand, with a pen, in 1843, by a 27-year-old woman in a world that did not think women could do mathematics. She also wrote something else in those notes, something that showed just how far ahead of her time she was. She warned that the machine could only do what it was told. It could not think on its own. It could not create on its own. It needed human intelligence to direct it. 150 years later, scientists and philosophers are still debating this exact question. Can machines truly think, or do they only do what we tell them? Ada was asking it in 1843. Chapter 4. The Tragic End. After the notes were published, Ada was quietly celebrated in certain scientific circles. Babbage respected her enormously. A few others recognized the significance of what she had done, but the world was not ready for her. Her work did not make her famous. It did not change her life in any visible way. She went back to her daily existence, her marriage, her children, her health problems. Ada had married a man named William King in 1835. He later became the Earl of Lovelace. That is where her famous name comes from, Ada, Countess of Lovelace. They had 3 children together. Her marriage was complicated. She had a restless, searching mind and a husband who was kind but could not fully keep up with her intellectually. She looked for stimulation elsewhere, in science, in mathematics, in society. She also developed some less fortunate habits. She gambled on horse aces. She believed she could use mathematics to predict the outcomes. She could not. She lost significant amounts of money and accumulated debts that caused serious problems. And through all of this, her health continued to deteriorate. In 1852, doctors discovered that Ada had uterine cancer. She was 36 years old. The treatments available at the time were brutal and largely ineffective. She suffered greatly in her final months. On November 27, 1852, Ada Lovelace died. She was 36 years old, the same age her father, Lord Byron, had been when he died. At her own request, she was buried next to him, the father she had never known, in a small church in Nottinghamshire, England. After her death, her notes were largely forgotten. The analytical engine was never built. Babbage continued working on his designs until he died in 1871, but never completed the machine. Ada's extraordinary vision, her algorithm, her insight, sat in old scientific journals as the world moved on. For nearly 100 years, almost no one remembered her name. Chapter 5. The world finally catches up. Nearly a century after Ada's death, a British mathematician named Alan Turing was working on something extraordinary. He was trying to build a machine that could think, a universal computing machine, a device that could perform any calculation if you gave it the right instructions. Sound familiar? In 1953, 110 years after Ada published her Notes, her work was republished for the first time. Scientists and historians began reading it, and they began to realize something astonishing. This woman had described the modern computer before the modern computer existed. She had written the first algorithm. She had understood the true potential of computing machines better than anyone of her era. By the 1970s and 1980s, as computers began entering everyday life, more and more people discovered Ada's story. In 1980, the United States Department of Defense created a new computer programming language. They named it Ada, in honor of the world's first programmer. In 1998, the British Computer Society created the Lovelace Medal, their highest honor, named after her. Every year on the second Tuesday of October, the world celebrates Ada Lovelace Day, a day to recognize women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Her portrait hangs in science museums. Her name appears on university buildings. Documentaries are made about her. Books are written about her. Children study her in schools around the world. And yet she spent most of her life being told that her gender made her unsuitable for serious scientific work. She published her greatest achievement under 3 letters because she knew the world would not listen to her full name. She was right about that, but she was also right about something far more important. She was right about the machine. She was right about what it could do. She was right that human intelligence and mechanical calculation could one day work together to do things that neither could do alone. She was 100 years ahead of her time, and the world spent 100 years catching up to her. Ada Lovelace lived for only 36 years. She spent much of that time sick, doubted, dismissed, underestimated, living in the shadow of a famous father she never knew and a mother who feared what she might become. And in that short, difficult life, she looked at a machine that did not yet exist and saw exactly what it would one day be capable of. She wrote the world's first computer program, by hand, with ink, in 1843. Every time you use a phone, a laptop, or any digital device, you are using a descendant of the idea she had in a drawing room in Victorian England. She did not get the credit she deserved in her lifetime, but history has a way of finding the truth eventually. And the truth about Ada Lovelace is this: she was not just a mathematician, she was not just a programmer, she was a visionary, a person who saw further than anyone around her, and left behind a map for the rest of us to follow. That is the story of Ada Lovelace, the woman who programmed the future. Thank you for watching ChronosX Secrets. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.